They're not talking about the best of them. They're just talking about the rest of them. Not the worst parts, but the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello and welcome to Best of the Rest, a show where we take a second look at superhero movies with less than stellar reputations, and we talk about the things that the movie actually gets right. It's all about having a positive conversation here. My name is Chris Logan.
And I'm Andrew Williams.
And today we're talking the 1995 film Batman Forever. Andrew, are you ready for this one?
I am absolutely ready for this.
I feel like this movie is, we're all, like I said, we're all about having a positive conversation, right?
Sure.
I don't know if you know this, Andrew, but out there on the internet, there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of jerks out there. I don't know if you've ever seen that discourse.
I went onto the internet once in 1997 and I've never been back.
It's a horrible, ranted place, and we want to be a beacon of positivity and good thoughts.
Yes.
And this movie, I think, is a good one to talk about in that regards.
It's not a movie known for its stellar reputation.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the discourse surrounding Batman Forever is not positive.
I think it might maybe beginning of the end is maybe what people would say about it. People that were fans of the original franchise, of Burton franchise, kind of see it going off the rails here. And it's not a movie that is taken seriously.
And to that credit, you could actually argue that the movie doesn't take itself very seriously, but it's definitely a heavy departure.
I would make the argument if this series were made today, were more modern, that it would almost be a situation of like Raimi's Spider-Man to The Amazing Spider-Man, which was a full-on reboot, right? They would call it that. And I think if these movies were made in today's era, that's what they would have done. They would have kind of acknowledged this is like a rebrand or a relaunch of the series. But let's set the stage a little bit. This was a huge hit, and the Batman franchise is really like the only name in superhero movies throughout the 90s. There were certainly other adaptations, but not a franchise nearly on this level.
Batman owns the 90s.
Absolutely. So this comes out June 16th, 1995. What's your history with this movie? Normally we talk about, hey, did we see it in theaters? What was our first impressions? But we're both millennial men. We were pretty young when this came out. Do you have any vivid memories the first time
I saw this in theaters? I know I did.
Yeah.
I know I would have been 8, I think. And I guarantee my dad took me, my brother, and my sister all to see this. What I was actually kind of surprised about is how much of this movie I remember.
How much have you watched it over the years?
I don't feel like I've watched it a lot. And so I'm curious how much of it is really just like it imprinted on my brain that heavily when I was a child versus like revisiting it. Because I can't even name a time where I potentially sat down and rewatched it before prepping for the show.
I was, I guess, I must have been 6 at the time. Wasn't quite 7 yet, but I'm sure I saw it in theaters. I don't have a vivid memory of seeing it in theaters, but I remember when the movie was in theaters because we certainly had the McDonald's collectible glass cups.
Oh, yeah.
There was a Riddler version that had like his staff on the handle. Of course, the Batman version. We had those. I grew up with those. For me, the entire Batman franchise was really of a piece to me growing up. Now, looking back, I can certainly see, like we were talking about, the departure when it switches over to Joel Schumacher, but it was just all Batman to me. This was really the movies that informed me of who Batman was and what he was all about, along with the animated series. So I will say a lot of what I would consider the iconic imagery of the Batman franchise comes from this movie specifically. You've got the ending shot of Batman and Robin running in front of the bat signal, which I just associate with the entire franchise, but it doesn't come around until this one. Kiss from a Rose, which is like the song,
the greatest song of all time.
Absolutely. And it doesn't come until the third movie. It reminds me a lot of how in the Rocky franchise, you don't get Eye of the Tiger until
Rocky 3.
Rocky 3, yeah. Same here, Kiss from a Rose.
Yet it's still seen as like this iconic piece of the franchise.
It doesn't even play until the second song of the credits. So it's not like they lead with it or play it in the movie. It's kind of buried, but that was like a legit hit on the radio. You couldn't escape it.
It was weird. I looked into that song a little bit researching this movie, and I saw that song was originally on the soundtrack for Neverending Story 3.
I had really,
Yeah,
I remember
no,
a music video with like Batman imagery.
You're right, because there is one, but like it came out on that soundtrack first in 1994, and because nobody in the world saw Neverending Story 3, it made like no impression. And so then
Wow.
when Batman Forever came around, they put it there, and like Joel Schumacher apparently like told Seal, yeah, we'll make you a music video. And like, I think he may have even done it for free. There's actually a really great video that Seal posted right after Joel Schumacher died, where he talks about Joel Schumacher like working with him and using the song and like being very supportive of it. And it's a wonderful story. But yeah, I just thought it was very interesting to hear that this song like came and went almost completely. And then almost because of Batman Forever, got this entire like revitalization that took it to like winning like 3 Grammy Awards.
That's very similar to how I associate Smash Mouth's All-Star with Mystery Men, because I'm one of the 15 people that saw that movie in theaters and loved it at the time. But most of the world associates it with Shrek. And I almost the hipster in me gets angry. I'm like, it's a Mystery Men song. So there's probably like Neverending Story fans out there that are like, no,
it's our song.
It's our song. Yeah, exactly.
the notion of there being diehard Neverending Story 3 fans.
You probably go to like a Neverending Story convention and there's people with signs trying to take the song back.
Oh, that's fantastic.
This movie is a huge hit, though. As much as people might,
it makes more money than Batman Returns does.
Absolutely. Batman Returns was a hit in its own right, but I guess Warner Bros. Really wanted to change directions and
Batman Returns makes less than Batman, and that's all Warner Brothers saw. It made significantly less than, like, Batman makes like 400 million. I think Batman Returns makes like 250, 260. So it was a pretty heavy drop in box office.
I guess it was
Batman
a dip, and they wanted to revitalize it.
They're trying to get it back, and
it worked. At least for one movie. So 336 at the box office off a $100 million budget. Great return. Critically, 39% is what Rotten Tomatoes is telling me. So I would say that qualifies as being panned by critics. That's pretty far below what they would certify as fresh. And again, like we're talking about, the reputation is that this movie is just silly and kind of ruins the dark version of Batman, that Burton took on. So let's look at this cast. I mean, the Batman franchise.
This is a relatively stacked cast. Generally,
it's insane
speaking.
When you look back. I was running through the names real quick. We'll do a deep dive in a minute. But Val Kilmer, Tommy Lee Jones, Jim Carrey, Nicole Kidman, Chris O'Donnell, Drew Barrymore is in there. I was looking at the cast and I was wondering, like, is this look stacked in retrospect because these people went on? But no, most of these people were either stars in their own right already, or were certainly a rising star that they were able to get on board. I want to talk about this cast. I want to know, we're going to start at the top. We're going to start at the high point. I want to know your MVP of this cast, Andrew. Sometimes these movies, even if they don't fully work, there's maybe one actor or actress that is raising the bar, that is raising the movie just with their performance, or at the very least, raising their character and what they were given to a whole new level. So if you had to pick one person in this cast that you think does that, who's your pick?
I think it has to be Jim Carrey as the Riddler. He's throwing himself into this role like 150%.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that's my pick as well.
Everybody else is fine. Fine to good. Like, there are people out here that are also doing a really, really great job. But Jim Carrey, like, rewatching the movie, I can just see him like, this dude is into this. I don't know if everything they do with the Riddler works for the character, but
he's a perfect fit for what I imagine Joel Schumacher's version was for this movie. Jim Carrey is dialed in 110%. And talk about insane casting. This comes out in 95. In 1994, that's the year of Jim Carrey, right? The same year, Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. That's just insane power.
That's a 3-for-3 win in 94, and then he goes on to be like, if you're looking for somebody to play the Riddler as you're choosing to present him here, there's no better choice, really.
Absolutely.
Like, I can't think, like, you look at some of the other names that they were talking about for it, and I was just like, nobody I'm trying to think of what's up there. I remember Mickey Dolenz, oddly, was the name I heard thrown around for the Riddler before this. And I've heard that he was part of it before the Burton version. But just like, first off, I love the Monkees. I would never in the world think that Mickey Dolenz is somebody that should play the Riddler.
The Monkees, they were a major influence on the Beatles.
They were, yes. I'm
To quote Jim Carrey, funny enough.
to make a weird full circle
Bring
thing
that full
there.
circle.
But yeah, I don't think there's anybody else at the time that would have done it the way Carrey does.
I mean, Jim Carrey in the 90s, the dude, I was curious. I was looking at his filmography, and he's just all hits, even things that we might think of as weren't a hit, like maybe The Cable Guy. That movie made money. He doesn't have what you might consider a bomb until, if you want to count Simon Birch as a Jim Carrey movie, that doesn't.
He's barely in it. Yeah.
He's barely in it.
I think he's literally in it for like 2 minutes, I think. Like,
he narrates is the big thing. And then he bounces right back with a string of hits like How the Grinch Stole Christmas was like the #1 movie of the year. It's absurd. And then it's not until The Majestic in 2001 where he has another bomb. But then again, he comes right back with Bruce Almighty and Eternal Sunshine. It bounces right back. I mean, the dude was box office gold for over a decade.
He really genuinely, I think, for a time there, was able to sell things just off of being Jim Carrey. Like, he was a movie star in that regard. He very much, like, people would go to see movies Jim Carrey was in solely because Jim Carrey was in them.
Now, for me, a kid in 94, 95, this man was a god. He was
comedy gold.
Yeah. And I know there were adults at the time that really rolled their eyes, but even the naysayers of Jim Carrey, I think they usually say, but his role as the Riddler, I liked. Even if they weren't a fan of Dumb and Dumber or Ace Ventura, they're like, okay, he works here. I still, as an adult, and maybe it's the millennial male in me talking, but I think very highly of Jim Carrey. He's a modern man. He's like Buster Keaton of the modern era, I would say. He puts every molecule, every atom of his body into the performance every single time. I've got a huge soft spot for the guy. I love him. I think he really works here, though.
This is kind of a departure from how the Riddler is classically presented.
Well, let's talk about that. Batman has been around since he's one of the oldest superheroes there are.
39.
He's got plenty of golden age villains that are really just a gimmick. Like most of the villains were at the time. They're a cool name, they're a gimmick, and that's all that informs their character. Over time, they've certainly developed into compelling characters.
Sure.
I think a great example of that is Mr. Freeze. You know, he was a gimmick character. He froze people. He had a freeze gun, and that's it. And then the animated series gives him a tragic backstory, and now he's like a classic Batman villain. That
backstory in Batman the Animated Series was so well received, it eventually became his comic book backstory. And that was one of several instances where that show did something so well, it became the comic version as well.
Yeah, I don't know if we're ever get a chance to talk about that show, but man, it's so good. Harley Quinn is probably the biggest example of something that originated on the show and became a big Batman canon character in their own right. But the Riddler, okay, he's just, even in Batman lore, even in comics, he is never a huge player, and he never really gets that cool psychology thing. I think he's kind of a big name just because he was on the 60s TV show, which I think we're going to be referencing a lot as we talk about this movie, because that show was certainly a big influence on what we're seeing.
You can feel it.
But no, tell me, he might have a big storyline every now and then. Hush is certainly a modern.
Hush is the one where there's several twists that eventually reveal the Riddler is kind of the mastermind of all of it.
Spoilers for the 2002
spoilers for the almost 20-year-old storyline Hush. But solely what I mean by that is Riddler is typically presented as somebody that is far less zany as he is here.
But you can do anything with him. Sure. Sometimes he's I think he's best when he's like a egomaniacal narcissist and he just wants to be noticed by Batman, which is a little bit what we see here.
Yeah. With a lot of Batman villains, you get a lot of adaptations over time. You get a lot of different versions. And this version, like I said, it works for this movie, and it certainly works to Carrey's casting.
Let's talk about Val Kilmer as Bruce Wayne / Batman, a role that once...
What? Bruce Wayne is Batman? Sorry.
Spoilers for the
almost 100-year-old character.
80-plus-year-old character. Val Kilmer, I know you and I both have a bit of a bro crush on this man. We love some Val Kilmer.
Oh, yeah. I love me some
Certainly
Val
a
Kilmer.
hot star at the time, coming off of Top Gun, Willow, The Doors, Tombstone, all huge hits. Certainly a rising star.
Yeah, and then Heat released the same year as this.
Same. What a year for Val Kilmer, huh?
And this is coming off his like run of like he's got his comedy roles in the mid 80s and stuff like that. So like Val Kilmer was not nobody. He was definitely a star.
I put Top Secret as I don't think that, I mean, this really wasn't a hit. It wasn't part of his rising stardom, but I love the movie Top Secret.
I love Top Secret. Top Secret is a fantastic movie. I rewatched that the other night just for fun.
It's good stuff. When Keaton turns down this role, he doesn't like where this series.
Keaton had agreed to stay on after Burton left. Like initially, he apparently was not opposed to continuing, despite Burton's
but once
departure. But when the script changes come in and all of that, they opt to get. He apparently turned down like 15 million.
Yeah, I read that. But this is now the hottest role in Hollywood, and they're looking for a young Bruce Wayne. I jotted down these names: Ethan Hawke, Keanu Reeves, both Alec and William Baldwin are apparently considered. Dean Cain, Tom Hanks. Imagine that world if Tom Hanks became Batman in this movie.
Well, that was weird because like you read about Batman 89, and I remember hearing that like Bill Murray was in the running, and it's like I can't even fathom Bill Murray as Batman.
The things we could have had.
Yeah.
But even Michael Keaton was weird casting. He's known for comedic roles at the time. I've heard, what do you think of this hot take? I got to try to think of how to phrase this. That Jack Nicholson, his star persona was so big that it spawned 2 other careers of men who were just doing imitations of Jack Nicholson. One of those men named is Michael Keaton, which that is slander to Michael Keaton. I think he is much more than a Jack Nicholson impersonation. But what do you think the other career was that is named as a career launch on just doing an imitation of Jack Nicholson? Because I think the other one is much more apt.
Man, I don't know.
Christian Slater. All that man is doing is an impression of Jack Nicholson. If you didn't see it before, you're going to see it now. I think it's most obvious in Heathers. He's on a motorcycle. He does the eyebrows. He tries to do the cool voice.
You've ruined Christian Slater for me.
I know you held him in such high regard, but
no, yeah, I would never say that. I think with Keaton, that's very much a stretch. That's an Ion Griffud level stretch there. But it's
hang on. Oof.
No, I'm now gonna be really afraid of watching anything with Christian Slater in it.
You should be afraid of watching anything in Christian Slater in it anyway. But now,
no love for True Romance there.
We are way off course. We're probably
we're way off course. All right, let's get back.
True Romance, bring it full circle though. You got Val Kilmer doing Elvis Presley.
Elvis, yeah.
According to Wikipedia, Val Kilmer signs on without reading the script and without knowing it was Joel Schumacher at the helm, just because who's going to turn down a role
like Batman?
Batman, which is insane. A few more names they were looking at: Daniel Day-Lewis.
It's a very diverse group. Like obviously, there's younger people, there's older people, there's even people like Dean Cain, who I'm pretty sure were playing Superman at the time.
Yeah, I think I factored into him not getting the role.
And just looking at that list, they looked at comedy people, they looked at serious people, they looked at method actors, they looked at Keanu Reeves, who's kind of this category amongst himself. Kilmer, I mean, on a base level, I can't at all say he was a bad choice. I
think he's got a good look. What's always driven me crazy about Val Kilmer, again, I love the guy. He's got very distinct lips. I think they are the most distinct part about his
he
lip.
Does.
And the one thing that you can see on Batman when he's in costume is his lips. And then in this movie, you've got a character that is going back and forth between Bruce Wayne and Val Kilmer, and it's like, dude, look at that guy's lips.
That's actually how you can tell when it's a stunt double playing Batman versus Val Kilmer, because the lips are wrong.
Yeah, nobody else has those.
No,
beautiful lips.
They should have just made like a prosthetic for whoever his stunt double was.
What do you think about what he's doing in this movie? I think he gets it. I think he gets the tone. It very much dry, deadpan deliveries on some of the more comedic lines. He's not blowing me away, but I like it.
Well, it's interesting because my memory was telling me he plays this movie almost too straight and almost too dry. And rewatching it again, I kind of saw that there's some levity in it, more than I thought. But just given the comedy, he's capable of, I just thought there might be a little bit more charisma with his Bruce Wayne.
Yeah,
But
I think he's playing the straight man in a wacky movie.
I think,
is
and
what they're
that's
going
I think
for,
that's a genuine. I think that's a deliberate choice. I think he's deliberately choosing to kind of play this a little bit more down to earth in a movie that's not very down to earth.
Yeah.
And
Some of the lines he gets are great though. It's the car, right? Chicks love the car. And it's really good. What do you think about Tommy Lee Jones as Harvey Dent / Two-Face? He's certainly making some choices here.
They're definitely playing this a little bit more over the top. Tommy Lee Jones is like, again, at this point, he's like a star. He's not an unknown.
Yeah, he's been around for a long time, mostly as a supporting actor, but his leading man status is certainly rising going into this movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, at this point, you've got like The Fugitive, you've got JFK, you've got Under Siege, you've got all these things, Cobb, even stuff like that. The Client,
which
he did
Joel
with Joel Schumacher.
Yeah.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke. But no, so like and like obviously not long after this, you get things like Men in Black, which come not far after it. So this is a guy who's not an unknown, and I think he is a very good casting, but I don't know if he vibes with the style of the movie as well as some of the others.
This movie is not interested in getting into the psychology of Two-Face,
no,
which,
it's not.
Funny enough, has some of the best psychology. We were talking recently about this character, how his origin story is the most interesting
thing about him.
Telling
and this movie skips it.
There's 5 seconds on a TV screen.
That's like a flashback.
Explaining that he gets acid thrown on his face. He holds up a piece of paper. It only burns half his face.
That's one of my favorite visual things in the movie is like he gets acid thrown on his face. And in the scene where the acid is thrown on his face, it looks like it just kind of hits his whole face.
No,
but then they show him with
line.
They show a folder on his face later, and it's perfect. On like one half is where the acid is.
For some reason, Batman is in the courtroom in full costume, and he's jumping from the crowd. I want that shot of him just sitting next to everybody else, listening to the proceedings.
Just hanging out, or he's like up in the rafters, just
making sure justice is being served.
No, you're right, because, and especially for a movie that actually tries to like dig into the psychology of Batman or like into the psychology of Bruce Wayne. And how, because like that's kind of what Nicole Kidman's part in this movie is. It's odd that they just blow right past Two-Face, who arguably has a deeper psychological story than Batman does.
And again, when these characters were created, they really were just fun gimmicks, and that's all they care about. There's a gimmick where he flips a coin, and then
they were just ciphers. I mean, they were nothing more than just ciphers for adventure, essentially. The lead characters themselves weren't that different. They're like Superman's initial stories. You can't really tell me what the characterization of Superman is. They're just ciphers for adventure. And the villains were just, what's a gimmick we can use to come up with a plot? And that's really all they were, especially in the Golden Age. And it's only when you get to the later stuff in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s that we really start trying to build out those ideas of what these characters can be. We start trying to give them unique characterizations. And Two-Face is an interesting one because, like you said, the conversation we kind of had is that most of the best Two-Face stories are about
his origin.
On one level, I appreciate that we do have a villain in this movie who's just already the villain, because that, to this point in all of these Batman movies, we'd gotten unique villain origins for everybody.
Yeah, all the backstories.
All the backstories, all the history, and we got all that for Riddler. But to have Two-Face just kind of already be here, I like that on just the storytelling level of like, you know what, let's just cut out the backstory. Let's cut the fat and just be all right, here's
get
Two-Face.
into the psychology of him anyway. There's no reason to spend the whole scene about it.
Did
you see in his filmography that apparently in 1988 he was in a movie called Gotham that was made for TV? Completely unrelated to Batman, just pure coincidence. But I had to click on it and read about that. But man, this movie, Gotham, more like Got Ham. Am I right? Hamming it up.
A lot of neon, a lot of Gothic statues. Just a very odd look. And don't get me wrong, the Schumacher apparently wanted to make it visually distinct from the Gotham of Burton's Gotham, and he succeeds there. It's extremely unique.
It looks great. It looks expensive. There's a scene, it's just panning through the city, and there's a neon sign for a laundromat. It's like crisscross laundromat.
Oh, it's Riddler's outside Riddler's apartment. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The letters are like flipping on the sign, and it's like this throwaway scene, and it's just
throwaway gag, and you put a lot of effort into this.
Very cool. Let's talk about the Batsuit really quick. Joel Schumacher kind of gets known as the guy who put nipples on the Batsuit, and his defense, I've always read in interviews, is like, I didn't think about it as homoerotic or weird. My inspiration was Greek gods and statues they would build of shirtless Adonis men. And
Yeah,
I buy that. I think it works.
I actually do.
I
Yeah,
think that's why he was going for it. And as a kid, I'll be honest, the scenes of
never
them,
thought about that. Like,
absolutely not. Them suiting up, I was like, this
never
is
cared.
awesome. I want to see his utility belt and him turning
Yeah.
into the camera. I always, it wasn't until much later that I thought, okay, I guess I can see why adults thought this was a little weird. Totally worked for me.
Yeah.
And I totally buy that explanation. And taking that aesthetic into the city, it's a very cool looking Gotham. If Burton's Gotham was gothic, and I've seen Batman the animated series described as dark deco. That's the word that they use.
I think that's a good description.
It's a very
like you look at like
cool look.
You legit look at like those old articles from newspapers that were like the world of the future. That's Batman the animated series Gotham. Like, it's very much how it looks. Yeah,
timeless but different. I would call this, I don't know, Greek Gothic. There's statues everywhere. They've got the bat suits like we talked about. In Bruce Wayne's home, he's got statues next to like his fireplace. Giant statues in the city, statues everywhere, very much like Greece. Greece is just statues everywhere, right? I've never been there.
Yeah, that's all Greece is. Yeah.
But I think that's the inspiration. And man, going back, I think it totally works. You've got Nicole Kidman as Chase Meridian, and I feel like I should know this, but is this an original character in this movie?
Yes. She is not somebody, and I don't believe she's somebody that we've like retroactively brought in either. I believe to this point, she is solely created for this film.
Interesting character, right? A psychologist that's going to examine Bruce Wayne and Batman. It seems kind of like a no-brainer for a Batman character.
Yeah. She's brought in initially, Commissioner Gordon says, to consult on basically Two-Face. You're given a hint that maybe she came to Gotham because of Batman. I don't really think that's a hint. I think that's very obvious. But obviously she ends up kind of caught between Bruce Wayne and Batman. Vicky Vale is, you get a hint of this with Vicky Vale and Batman 89, but it doesn't go nearly as far. Her relationship is much more tied to just Bruce. But this is the first one that kind of tries to play with an idea of somebody who somehow can look at Val Kilmer's lips and not realize it's the same guy.
Yeah, and Nicole Kidman, I think her biggest roles are still ahead of her, but certainly a rising star by this point. Plenty of movies to her credit. The biggest ones are probably her movies with her, I guess, then husband. I don't know if they're married by then, but Tom Cruise. Days of Thunder, Far and Away, both big hits that came out before this. So her casting makes a lot of sense here.
She's definitely somebody that she's one of the few people I think at this point wasn't known particularly for anything huge, but was clearly somebody that had a bunch of big notable roles and then was obviously going to come, like obviously things like Eyes Wide Shut, stuff like that was coming later. So
yeah,
I think she's given a really interesting role.
She is horny for Batman. That's like her introduction,
man. Like
her first scene with him on the rooftop, she's just throwing herself at him.
Yeah, that scene where she like shows up next to the bat signal, like in lingerie, like throwing herself at Batman, like
taking clothes off.
I think my notes literally say thirsty AF, like straight up, like underlined 3 times.
She probably saw like a picture of Batman and saw those lips, Val Kilmer's lips, and was like, "Man, I gotta give you some of that."
Those.
Chris O'Donnell as Dick Grayson / Robin.
Obviously, Scent of a Woman was the thing he was known for.
Yeah, so certainly rising star status, and this is probably his high point. The 2 Batman movies, never really takes off in movies, but has since had a long career on TV. Not shows that I watch. I think he's on NCIS for a long time.
He's still on NCIS LA, and he's been doing that for like 12 years now. So
I'm sure everybody's mom enjoys watching him on that show.
That dude gets to retire, is all I'm saying.
One day I would love to see in a live action Batman movie a 10-year-old, 12-year-old Robin. I don't know how you pull that off, but that's traditionally kind of Robin's age in the comics, especially when he first takes him in. Yeah. It's kind of funny whenever I was watching this with my wife, and obviously at the circus, we know what's going to happen. I'm like, he's a grown ass man. He doesn't need to be adopted.
But yeah, like that's the one thing in the movie that really doesn't work very well is just because like even then, like they're like, take him in, he's got nobody. And I'm just like, but he's like 30. Like,
they never say his age. I assume 17 is what they're going for.
Yeah, I'm guessing they're assuming he's right on the cusp of like, he can't quite be on his own yet.
Yeah.
But they don't do any work to make O'Donnell look like he's not in his mid-20s.
It's fine. I'll say this. If you're looking at this movie and thinking like, how does Bruce Wayne have a tube that goes from his office to his house? Or how does the Riddler have his own island with a giant hydraulic system? You're watching the movie wrong. That's not
Right.
how you should be watching this movie, because
No.
it's not like it thinks it's pulling one over on you.
Right.
It knows and it embraces how ridiculous it is. And so
Well,
we're
like
talking about how
you'd see in the stuff you'd see in the comics and never question too.
exactly.
Like you'd never and I won't lie, when I was watching it, I was just like, who built this tunnel? I had that moment where I was like, who built this tunnel from his office to the Batcave and didn't did he do this himself? Like, how did he do this? And then I was just like, but no, nobody cares.
I'm sure writing the movie and coming up with that concept, they were thinking the same thing. They probably thought, wouldn't it be fun if he could just cross his arms and slide down a tube? It's like a modern version of the fireman's pole from the 60s TV show.
Right, exactly. And when you put it like that, that's probably exactly what it was. Like the idea of we go down a pole and suddenly we have our bat suits on. It's like he can just go from his office to the Batcave.
What do you think about this characterization of Dick Grayson? It's the backstory of Dick Grayson as far as being an acrobat, but it's really some of the more characteristics of Jason Todd. He's edgier. He's kind of streetwise.
Yeah, they do that. And they also tie Two-Face to his family's origin, which has not typically been
similar to Batman 89,
history.
Making Joker tied into Batman's origin.
These movies in general tie the villains and their origins to each other a lot more than in the past. Because even in Batman Returns with Catwoman, you get her tied to like a very strange scenario with her boss and like with all that. It's very strange. But with this, they tie Two-Face to Robin's origin because typically it's one of the mob guys. I think it's
Tony Zuko in the animated series.
Zuko, yes.
Yeah.
They do seem to be merging a lot of those concepts together, like taking the ideas of like Jason Todd, giving that kind of street edge, but kind of marrying that to the story and look of potentially Dick Grayson. When you're trying to build a movie and you're trying to do it in a certain way, I think that's just decisions you make. And
the thing is, comics are literally never-ending stories that can evolve and change characters. Movies aren't going to go on forever. You only get one shot at most of these, so why not merge them and make the definitive movie version? So I got no problems with that. Michael Gow as
Michael
Alfred.
Gow, I think.
Michael Gow. So one of the few things that connects this movie to the previous ones is Alfred Pennyworth, and I think he's fantastic in all of the movies. I think he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do. In these movies, Alfred is certainly much more of a father figure to Bruce Wayne. In later adaptations, and sometimes in the comics, Alfred is a little bit more hands-on with like field work and
like in Justice League, Alfred is much more
he's just like
with what he does for Batman.
He's like Batman's partner. He's like, hey, I'll put on a suit. I'll go fight crime with you. I can do it. I'm like,
let me do it.
I'm like 5 years older than you. But Alfred in this one is very warm, very kind.
Yeah, very
traditional Alfred take, I think.
Obviously, you can sense that he's got that sympathy to Dick Grayson. He's trying to reach out to him, including that very odd scene where Robin ninja fights laundry to put it on a line.
He kicks that laundry's ass. You see him do that, and you're like, man, this guy would be a great crime fighter.
I don't understand why he's like that.
But he's making a mess on the floor with all the water. But nice guy Robin, he mops it up. Yeah, because he's a hero, and that's what heroes do.
That's what heroes do. They mop up after their stuff. But no, Michael, like I said, he's one of the few links between this and the previous movies. Him and Pat Hingle as James Gordon are pretty much the only ones.
Let's talk about the Commissioner Gordon in this series, because again, sometimes we see Gordon much more hands-on with Batman. Pat Hingle, this Commissioner Gordon, his only role is to be like, help, Batman, here's the bat signal.
That's pretty much all he does in these.
Which again reminds me of the 60s series where all Commissioner Gordon did was call Batman directly.
Pretty much. It's an interesting... It really, again, it turns Commissioner Gordon really just into like, he's like just your reminder that there are police in Gotham, essentially. Like that's all he does. And
he looks like Harvey Bullock, but
a little bit.
Gordon.
I will say it's funny though, because Michael Gow is actually in Top Secret.
Yeah, I saw that. I had forgotten about it until I was researching this, and I was like, they've worked together.
They're actually in that movie together, and I just thought it was interesting to look back at that.
You got George Wallace as the mayor, which I think really tells you what the creators and producers of this movie were thinking when it came to the tone for the movie. I mean, George Wallace, he's just a comedian. He's had bit parts in different movies, but he's just a stand-up comedian. Yeah, let's cast him as literally the mayor. That's the only thing he's credited as.
He literally gets no other roles beside that.
Drew Barrymore is in this movie. You wouldn't know this character except for the fact that it is Drew Barrymore. And at the time, she's really just a child actor. She has her personal demons. This is part of her kind of like comeback, I guess. So I think at the time, nobody was going, oh my gosh, it's Drew Barrymore. But looking back, it's interesting to see such a big star in such a small role.
Right, because it's after this that she started, like The Wedding Singer is, I think, 98, Never Been Kissed is 99. So like at Charlie's Angels is 2000. So like,
this and
her
Scream
resurgence
are kind
comes,
of the beginning.
So this I think is 90. This is 95. Scream is 96. So, but obviously she's known from like the 80s for like E.T. and Firestarter. So this is part of that kind of in between period where she's kind of had her demons and is now staging the comeback. Ironically enough, she was in a movie called Poison Ivy.
Fun fact. Let's talk about Joel Schumacher directing this. And Tim Burton's out. Joel Schumacher is in. Tim Burton.
One other quick note on casting I want to make is that apparently Jon Favreau has a cameo in this movie as an assistant.
Yes, I was watching this movie with my wife, and it's the first time we see Edward Nygma, and Bruce Wayne is walking in with his like posse of people, and she goes, "Is that Happy?" And literally, the scene was already over. I had to rewind it. She's like, "That's Jon Favreau." I was like, "It is.
It is.
That is.
It is.
That is." Cage fighting 90s Friends Jon Favreau, for anybody that's watched Friends.
This is 95. So I mean, Swingers comes after this, Maid comes after this, all that is like after, way down the road.
I mean, there's a reason he is playing an extra basically.
But yeah, so Joel Schumacher, digging into that.
Yeah, I think he gets his role based on movies like St. Elmo's Fire, The Lost Boys, and Flatliners, which are kind of like teen movies, but big hits. I think they want like a youthful energy for the Batman, for changing gears as far as the Batman franchise. That being said, the man is also responsible for movies like Falling Down, A Time to Kill, 8mm, and Phone Booth. Most of those come after this movie, but I say that because for most people my age, when they talk about Joel Schumacher, what I've always heard is like, again, he's the guy that put nipples on Batman. He's a joke, basically. And most of my life, if you ask me about Joel Schumacher, that's probably what I would say as well. But I think that's just very dismissive of a man with some great movies under his belt and diverse movies too. It's not like all of his movies are full of neon like this one. He does what's right for the project, and a lot of respect for him for that. And
he's an interesting, and it's actually interesting to me because he actually makes a Time to Kill between this and Batman and Robin.
Very dark movie too.
Yes, extremely.
Yeah.
Extremely.
Like, so I don't even want to say the premise of it.
No, I don't. I'd rather
the
not.
Podcast, but don't look really it up if you don't know.
Everyone's just going to leave sad if we do that. But no, it's so he's obviously got a lot of range, a lot of ability, and like had made well-received, critically acclaimed movie. Like The Client is one I don't think you mentioned, but that's one. I think that's the movie he does right before Batman. And I think Susan Sarandon got nominated for an Academy Award for that. So he's clearly capable of turning in like star-making, critically acclaimed, successful performances in movies. And apparently Burton was big on picking Schumacher to do this. Like it was a Burton, like he approved the decision or whatever. I can't say it was a bad choice. He's obviously got a lot of history with films. And I think the movie they wanted to make, he, like you said, he comes and he makes the movie that he adapts to the project. And I think that's definitely what he does here.
What's interesting is I think as much as we've talked about these movies are the Batman for us, people making these movies, people Joel Schumacher's age, when they think classic Batman, if they weren't reading the comics, or even if they were,
think Adam West.
They think Adam West. Yeah, which...
That's clearly an influence on this movie.
Yes.
Very clearly.
I'll say that. So I want to talk about some of the high points of the movie, some of our favorite parts, what really works. The first thing I want to acknowledge is how the movie starts, because my first note here just says, what a time capsule. The opening credits today could be made on an iPad. It's like word art, and it's the actor's names flying through the air, then flying in front of the camera, super loud sound effects, which must have been exhilarating in a theater in 1995. But today, like I said, what a time capsule.
Is kind of a throwback to I mean, Superman the movie does its credits that way.
Okay.
I think you've said you've never actually watched that all the way through, but it does a very similar, like the names kind of fly forward and then you see them and then they like fly past the camera. But again, it's something that like nowadays you could do so easily on your even your phone.
It certainly sets the tone. You get the movie opens with all the close-ups of the bat suit, and then the first lines of the movie is Alfred insisting that he takes a sandwich. And what does Val Kilmer say?
I'll get drive-through.
Yeah, that tells you everything you need to know about this movie.
Yeah.
Like you're either on board or you're not.
You're either in or out at pretty much that moment. I feel like that line was used in like commercials for the Happy Meals and stuff.
I'm sure it was, yeah.
Because I remember like hearing that line, and then it was like in the movie, and I was shocked. And
you did the Leonardo DiCaprio point as a little kid?
Yeah, pretty much. Because like I thought it surely must have been, even as a kid, I was like, oh, they shot a commercial.
Of the entire movie, where's the high point for you? Where's the movie firing on all cylinders and delivering on its promise?
I don't know. I feel like the climax really is like obviously you've got Riddler with his jokes. I feel like
on the Riddler Island.
Yeah, I think that really I think this movie does genuinely build to that, and it makes
what a
it like
set that is. It looks so
and I
cool.
think that's like it's a great again, you can put the notions of other things aside, but I think just as a climax to where this movie is going, I think it works perfectly. Like you've got Batman, and they're playing with the duality of it because you've got Batman being forced to choose between Robin and Chase.
When Two-Face and Riddler were planning that, they were like, hopefully Batman debuts a sidekick tonight, so we have someone to go on the other tube.
Chris, you're watching the movie wrong.
I know.
But no, speaking genuinely to the movie, this all works for me. Like as far as what this movie is. Obviously, you've got Riddler thinking that he's completely in control at this point. You've got Riddler thinking he's got this basically all dialed up. He's like, you can't get past this now. The only way to win is to lose.
Whenever Batman first infiltrates the Riddler dome, I don't know what else to call it, there's a fisheye shot of it to show the whole thing, and it holds that for a long time because I think they're like really proud of this set, as they should be. Yeah. You got Riddler's throne and the question marks everywhere. It is, as you said, really a culmination of this movie.
And it works for me. Obviously, we've got Batman in his random new costume, which they do a better job explaining why he has a new costume here than a lot of other movies do.
You know what's interesting? When The Dark Knight came out, obviously Batman gets a new suit in that movie, and there's a story purpose for it. And I remember thinking, hey, that's cool. They incorporated like a reason for Batman to get a new costume. I thought that was the first time until I rewatched this movie. And I was like, hey, they put it in story.
They do conveniently reveal that he had an extra suit he was working on.
Yeah, the other ones got destroyed and he had one more suit.
Yeah, but it's still at the same idea of just like not just doing a throwaway of like he's randomly got a new suit like they do in a lot of these other movies. In this case, they were genuine like, well, all your other suits got destroyed. So now you have to use this new suit. And again, you could argue that it's contrived or whatever, but it's still, we're working into the movie why he's just randomly got a new suit.
It has some kind of sonar capabilities.
Yeah.
I don't know.
At one really point, dive too deep into that.
They don't. He just throws a batarang, stuff pops over his eyes.
He flips it on and then like throws the batarang at the Riddler thing, which I don't think he needed the fancy sonar thing to do.
I don't know.
It's it's whatever.
I'm glad the suit has a story purpose, even though really the point is to sell more toys, which is fine. But speaking of selling more toys, I cannot believe that there is not a Riddler edition of the game Battleship. It's set up so well in this movie with the Riddler and Two-Face playing Battleship, and you've got little Batman pieces. I would have bought that. I'll buy that today.
Awesome. I'd buy that now.
For me, the high point of the movie, I love the finale. I agree with all your points there, but I think my high point comes on Halloween night. When all of a sudden it's Halloween for one scene.
I texted my brother and was like, I guess this is a Halloween movie.
Yeah, I'm going to add it to my voodoo list of holiday movies.
You could argue the entire climax of this movie takes place on Halloween. I assume it has to.
I guess so, but it's only acknowledged whenever there's some trick-or-treaters. And then the Riddler and Two-Face show up as trick-or-treaters, so Alfred lets them in, and they take over Wayne Manor. And I love that we get some action scenes as Bruce Wayne running around, getting chased by goons, using the dining room table and the couch to flip over and stuff. Just kind of silly, fun gags, but things that we haven't seen a lot in these movies. Bruce Wayne doing some action scenes, protecting Chase along the way. And then you've got the Riddler that makes his way into the Batcave and just utterly destroys it. And Jim Carrey going full Jim Carrey, just really selling it, because there's nobody else on set but him, and he's got the hip thrust, he's got the bulge, he's got twirling of the cane. This dude must have practiced a lot with that cane. Every chance he gets, he's flipping it and twirling it, and I don't know if that's maybe a skill he already had or he developed it for this character, but I can't picture the Riddler without a cane now after this.
Yeah, you got to have it. It's just a very cool sequence of events to have it take place at Wayne Manor, to have kind of Batman losing on his own turf. And this kind of segues directly into the next sequence of events to get us to the climax. But I gotta say, the way they put together the hint of all the riddles is still way out there.
Okay, let's talk about these riddles. They have stuck with me my whole life, not just the riddles themselves, but the way they fold out and they're made out of cut out letters and stuff. But ultimately, the answers to the riddles don't matter. All that matters is that they all have a number on them, and then result.
Well, to be fair, it's the riddle within the riddle, basically. It's like I'm giving you all these riddles, and then you have to figure out what they all have in common with each other, which is another riddle in itself. But the ultimate solution is they all have a number, but then they just randomly decide to put two of those numbers together to make it so that they have the right letters. And for that sequence, I was like, it's like that's a bit of a jump there.
But again, we talk about it a lot, but you go back to the Batman Adam West show. You
absolutely have things like that.
That's how the Riddler, something super zany, and the answer was a totally obscure reference.
No, but it's definitely feeding into like just the tone of the movie. But yeah.
So not only is Jim Carrey great as the Riddler, but I love him as Edward Nygma as well. Mr. E. There's like 3 puns within his name alone. But I like that his obsession is originally with Bruce Wayne and not Batman. That makes for some
his obsession, I think, is completely with Bruce Wayne. I don't think his obsession is ever with Batman.
I guess that's until he finds out they're the same person.
Right. And then at that point it just feeds into it. But like even at the party where he's like, how's my mole?
I did not even realize that. I thought the mole scene was very strange. But I didn't realize
Val Kilmer has a mole on like in the same spot. And so it's literally like, not just does he need to be Bruce Wayne visually, he wants to have a more successful company. He wants to be able to do everything. His whole obsession is being better than Bruce Wayne.
I love the scene where Bruce Wayne goes to visit Chase and he thinks that she's in trouble. He
knocks the door down.
And he breaks through the door, and then he realizes she's okay, and he starts clumsily trying to pick it up and put it back into place. I love like a clumsy
that was the moment where I realized there was more charisma in his Bruce Wayne than I remembered. Because that was the moment where like he really is like stumbling all over himself. He's like, I do love her response though, where he's like, I have an appointment, I'm Bruce Wayne, and she's like, good, that means you can buy me a new door. And like the sequence there at the circus where he's talking to her, like I just really realized there was more charisma to the Bruce Wayne than I realized, as far as just like he's got a little bit more levity and humor than I remembered.
The running joke about her calling the Riddler a wacko.
Yeah.
At a technical term, Doctor.
No, there's one bit in the movie that I thought was really, really funny. It's the sequence right after Riddler has staged the suicide of Ed Begley Jr.'s character, Fred Stickley. He's but it's right when Bruce Wayne is like back at Wayne Enterprises and they're telling him what's happened, and he's like, I want full benefits for his family, and she's like, suicide isn't covered by our insurance. He's like, I want full benefits, and she's like, I'll make sure it happens. By the way, who are you taking to the celebrity circus? And I just thought that like departure so quickly from like, this employee of yours has just committed suicide and you're telling me what you want to do for his family, combined with, oh, hey, there's a circus coming up. Where are you taking that?
The movie's got to stay on brand. It was getting way too serious, way too dark.
Way too serious. We got to go back to the
circus.
That was probably one of the most, I know the movie wasn't trying to play that for laughs, but I think I laughed harder than I really should have, just at how stark the departure was from your employee is dead to who are you taking to the circus?
The circus is the most Tim Burton looking part of this movie.
Oh yeah,
maybe just because it is a circus and that kind of plays into Tim Burton's visuals.
I think it's a circus plus with the over the top nature definitely gives you a late stage Burton feel. It's definitely a movie that like I said, it knows what it is. It's very much like, I don't know if it just came out, and I don't know if I'm dating this podcast at all, but like Kong versus Godzilla. Like that's a movie that knows exactly what it is, and it leans into it, and it plays into it, and sometimes it works,
Also
sometimes
full
it
of
doesn't.
neon lights.
Yes,
For another parallel.
I think I really don't know if this is me just sounding contrary or not, but I think the hate on this movie is. I think people do lump this in with Batman and Robin a lot, and I think that in turn colors the opinion of this one just because they see this as like a direct step to it. I don't know if this one deserves all the hate that it gets.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a hot take or not. I would say the Rotten Tomato score is about right. Okay, it's 46. I think somewhere around 50% makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, if you know what this movie is and what it's trying to do, and you're okay with that, it is a lot of fun and it nails what it's trying to do. The only thing is that flavor is not going to be right for everybody, especially if you're a big fan of the first two Burton movies.
Right. Because like you said, today they would have just rebooted it. They would have just done a new character. They would have just done, or rather, they would have just recast everybody and just set it up as a new thing. Because you actually, like, outside the recasting of Go and Hingle, there's no real narrative threads that require it to be a sequel.
I wrote down one line that I think might be the only reference. And it's whenever Chase Meridian says, "Do I need skin tight vinyl and a whip?" Of course, referencing Catwoman from the last movie. And that's about the only time, other than the actors that return, where they reference the past two movies. Yeah.
And so it's something where you could have very easily just recast those two roles and just made it a hard split.
Let's talk about Dick Grayson becoming Robin and his relationship with Bruce Wayne. There's a scene that I think is really effective whenever Dick Grayson first gets to Wayne Manor and he plans on just leaving. And Bruce takes him to the garage and shows him all his cars and the motorcycles, and they really bond over that moment.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that scene, even as a kid, was really cool, just seeing all like the motorcycles.
Oh, yeah. All the cars, all the stuff.
Just thinking like, man, can you imagine just having all of that?
Yeah, and no, I think that is a really effective scene because, like, I think a lot of the, like, Dick Grayson, Bruce Wayne, Alfred stuff, I think a lot of that works. Because you get Dick Grayson, who's kind of apparently just agreed to come to Wayne Manor because he was like, I just wanted to avoid all the hassle and BS of like social services and charities and all that. And so he's doing this just as a way to kind of like circumvent a lot of that. And Bruce Wayne is obviously wanting to do it because he feels some level of responsibility for what happened, because he feels that he wasn't able to stop Two-Face and stop his parents from dying.
Yeah, and he sees himself in Dick Grayson as a kid who loses his parents in front of him.
And then you've got Alfred, who's just following his kind of paternal instincts of just being a father, you know, just caring and having sympathy and empathizing. And I think a lot of this stuff works because you've got Robin, who definitely feels out of place being in this kind of place of luxury. You know, they have that scene where he ninja fights the laundry, where he's like, I'm not used to being waited on. And that's why he mops up the water himself, because he gets it.
Because he's a hero.
He's a hero, and that's what heroes do.
The scene. This happens twice, but I love the scene where Dick Grayson sneaks into the Batcave by doing his acrobatics and sliding through the door.
His parkour through the...
And then alarms go off about an intruder. But it also boots up the computer and raises the Batmobile. And it does it again when the Riddler breaks in. It's like, intruder. Here's the Batmobile.
No lockdown.
Yeah, here's all my stuff. Intruder.
And I do like that. I do like where Alfred calls Bruce on his Power Ranger watch, and it's just like he took the car, and he's just like being all vague. And he's like, no, the other car.
And he goes through like three off. Like they drag that scene on. I could have gone with like 8 different options.
Yeah, like
the Benz.
You could have the Benz. He boosted the Jag. No,
the Aston Martin.
Car. The Bentley? No. Just how rich is this guy? Let's just list all the cars he's got. Speaking of that, the Batmobile in this is obviously a huge departure from...
I would say it's, again, selling toys. I really like the Bat logo hubcaps.
On the tires,
that light up hubcaps. I'm not a fan of like the rib for her pleasure look.
It's an interesting look. Apparently H.R. Geiger, who is responsible for like the designs of the Alien and a bunch of other... He designed a Batmobile for this movie. The final version is not apparently one he did, even though if you asked me who did
I'm
it, I
sure
would have...
It's very sexual, whatever he designed.
Yes, because that's what H.R. Geiger does.
So he steals the Batmobile. He's driving through the city. We get a good look at Gotham on like a street level. And of course, all the people, apparently that's in vogue, the ladies that come up to the Batmobile. So speaking of
that's in vogue.
Yeah. So very 90s
yes.
cameo to have there. But they see it and they say, oh, Bat Boy. He's not wearing his costume.
Yeah.
And then he goes and gets into a fight with neon gangs.
I don't know if they ever, because I feel like this exact same gang shows up in Batman and Robin.
Just general thugs of Gotham.
Blacklight stuff where like they're all wearing like paint. They're all like this whole section of Gotham is lit with black lights.
I like that we see that Dick Grayson can fight, and he has some cool fight scenes before Batman shows up.
It's a cool scene just to see like a street level view of Gotham in this world.
One thing I do like that the Batmobile does is the scene where it drives up a wall. It launches that grappling.
Again, you're looking at 60s Batman homages.
Oh,
yeah. It even shows like a bunch of the people
tenants
in their houses, like watching the Batmobile drive up this wall.
Yeah, very Adam West. The most obvious reference to the Adam West Batman is, of course, Holy Rusted Metal Batman. Yeah, that's directly what they're doing. Which I remember seeing that as a kid and knowing it was like a reference or something, and like asking my parents, "Why is this funny?" And them kind of explaining it. I love Val Kilmer's reaction to it. Is what? Oh.
Yeah, he like just completely deadpans that.
Is this the first time we see Arkham Asylum in a movie?
Yes.
I think so. Something that certainly when I was a kid probably didn't register with me. They just showed the name.
I don't think we see it in either of the Burton films because none of the villains really survived those. So no, I don't think this has to be the first movie we see Arkham Asylum in. And that's actually a bit appearance from Rene Auberjonois as the head of Arkham Asylum.
Who was that?
He was notable for being a character on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And he's just like, he's in the opening credits, but he's literally like in those 30 seconds at the end of the movie. And that's it.
We talked about how iconic Kiss from a Rose is in relation to this franchise, running in front of the bat signal at the end. And also for me, the image of the bat in the spotlight flapping its wings, that has always stuck with me as a cool Batman visual.
Yeah.
Speaking about this franchise being somewhat of a reboot, or would have been a reboot these days, they tell his whole origin again. They talk about his parents getting killed as if we didn't already know that. So it's almost like they wanted this to be a
clean break, but
a point for new people to jump on board. Is this the first time Batman falls into a cave? And that's where he gets inspired by bats? Because, again, I thought Batman Begins was the first one to do that.
Well, no, this one does have it. I don't think either of the Burton films do the...
I mean, in general, because like in comics, very, very original, a bat breaks through the window.
Yeah.
It's an omen. I will become a bat is basically all there is to it. Which I thought they were going to do. They showed the flashback scene and they showed some like stained glass windows. Like, I think I have the bat break through there. But no, he falls into the cave. And I don't think Year One does that. Although there is a pretty strong imagery reference to Year One when his parents are dead and young Bruce Wayne is on his knees and there's a spotlight around him. It's very much Frank Miller's Year One.
Very much a Year One illusion.
But as far as I know, this is the first time young Bruce Wayne falls into a cave.
I think so. Because they played with that notion that like he falls into the Batcave essentially.
Yeah.
Or into what becomes the Batcave.
He says it must have been here for centuries.
Because that's how caves work, Bruce. But no, it's interesting because I didn't think about that. But yeah, I assume it kind of has to be the first time we've really done that. There are a lot of really cool scenes in this movie. There are a lot of really cool sequences. And like you talk about how Carey threw himself into this role. I think Schumacher like really does throw himself into this movie. You see a lot of effort is put in. Like you said, it looks and shows that this is an expensive movie. And I think this is absolutely the movie that Schumacher wanted to make.
But no, I agree. It's exactly the movie they went out to make. And I can have a lot of fun with it now. I liked it as a kid, and maybe going back years later, I kind of disconnected with it. But looking at it through this lens, again, trying to be positive, which is what we're all about, I had a great time with it.
Yeah, so did I.
That is Batman Forever. A good time. If you are like us and maybe haven't watched it in a few years, I say it's worth another go. If you've written this movie off as bad or anything other than what it's supposed to be, again, I would maybe try to watch it with a new lens and you might find something to enjoy.
I can't say I had a bad time watching this because I didn't.
Thank you to Mark Benavides of Rogues Among Us for singing our theme song. Follow at Not That Mark Anthony on Instagram. If you like the show, please tell a friend, rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help. And follow us on Twitter at BOTRcast. Thank you.